Well, this is your home of absolutely, completely fair comments and context. We say it as it is. Let's get into it. This is News Sources. My name is James Smart. Tonight, the courts have declared amendments to the Constitution, allowing the President to appoint the next Chief Justice unconstitutional. Parliament had changed Section 33 of the Constitution in attempts to give President Uhuru Kenyatta a say in the appointment of new CJ, contrary to the Supreme Law.
We declare that the amendment to Section 33 of the Judicial Service Act, Void Statute Law Miscellaneous Amendment Act 2015, was unconstitutional, null, and void.
All right, that's where we take it up. Introducing my guest tonight, Milton Nyakundi. Karibu to the program.
Thank you.
Once again, Clay Muganda.
Thanks for having me.
The first time, and Atama Ngoko for the first time as well. Gentlemen, big story today. That's where we are. A few months to, I think, weeks to Chief Justice William Mutunga taking off and the courts coming up with a shocker. Let me start from the extreme end. Atama, what do you make of this?
The ruling is very much in order. We need to have the separation of powers. And that's exactly what the courts have upheld. We can't have the president appointing the person to oversee such a critical...
He wasn't really appointing, though. He was, the technicality was being given 3 names.
No, actually, if they passed it, it means technically the president was going to appoint at the end of the day. Because you'll be given 3 names, and then you will have to choose one for those 3 names. That's technically appointing. And as it is, the Judicial Service Commission needs to have the mandate to vet the candidate, only give the president and to play his role as the ceremonial.
Clay.
I think I'll probably agree with him in as much as this is a hurdle actually that the country had passed, because I remember the last time when the CJ was supposed to be appointed. There was a lot of hullabaloo because I think President Kibaki did appoint, and Mr. Odinga made a lot of noise, and that's when we went back to the Judicial Service Commission. So I did not see actually the need of rolling back for us to go back to the Judicial Service Commission. I mean, to roll it back, to go to the situation where appointing, even if it's from the 3 names forwarded, the Chief Justice by taking it back to the executive, I did not see the need for that. I don't think we have reached a crisis point yet to the point where we have to go back, that it is the executive that
surely
has
there
to
must
do
be
it.
some wisdom in the passing of that piece of amendment.
I have my reservations in as far as any wisdom is concerned, but I think what we are seeing is the mischief by the National Assembly using the tyranny of numbers being exposed again, because like Clay rightly said, we had already gone through that process where the president tried to appoint the Chief Justice. And if you ask me, it is automatic that if you give the president 3 names, from whom then he would choose one, that is like giving him the final call to make. And I think the courts have today stood with the Kenyan people who said we do not want interference by the executive or whichever other arm of government in the affairs of the other.
And James, remember, these are the 2 individuals. You know, by so doing, the president will have been given the mandate to choose the Chief Justice and the Deputy Chief Justice. And remember, in the Supreme Court, like what happened, these 2 individuals play a bigger role in the Supreme Court. So, and we know, like what happened in the case of the last elections, whereby the Supreme Court had to make a ruling. So if you give the president an upper hand, I think you will not be doing justice to the judicial system.
Is it just the technicality of the president not being able to choose or not having anything to say by, the Chief Justice? Is that enough to talk of judicial independence?
But see, James, that's why we have the 3 arms of government, and they are supposed to be independent.
And
I really think really the problem should not be looked at the president's door. Really, this is about parliament. It is about the majority leader. It is about the 349 guys who sit in the August House and they pass this law, because you cannot pass any law that is against... The Constitution is very clear that if you have an act of parliament or any legislation, be it at the national level or county government, that is inconsistent with the spirit and letter of the Constitution, then that act is null and void to the extent of the inconsistency. And that is what the courts have done here today. And perhaps if this could be used as jurisprudence, then we are likely to see many other Kenyans going out there and saying, you know, we have had a few laws or pieces of legislation passed by this parliament that are unconstitutional. Case in point is the national security laws that we had hue and cry about. I wish a Kenyan went to court to challenge that as well.
Part of it has been impeached, but go on.
You see, what's going on is that all the literature that I've been reading about the ruling today, or even when the first time when the State National Assembly passed it, it was that not to give the president, they've been very particular, to give President Uhuru powers. And I keep on asking myself, so what happens then when President Uhuru is no longer there? I mean, this thing should have been to give the president, but it's like as the tyranny of numbers, or actually the National Assembly was doing it specifically. It's like after this, in the next probably, if they're going to lose or if they're going to leave parliament, they'll turn it around and say, okay, fine, now we are taken back, now we can make the amendment again. But I think if here is a case where we should build institutions, not personalities, you see. So it should be that the president, whoever it is, be it James Smart, be it Nyakundi, be it
you should have left it James Smart, but
no, I'm just saying. What I'm saying is that it should be that the president does not have the powers. The Judicial Service Commission as an institution. So you see
this speaks about the independence of
institutions and actually their strength. Also, we need to build institutions.
And Matthew James, part of the ruling was for this clause to have been amended, it needed to be subjected to public participation. Yes. You know, it's sort of now taking us to another referendum for this particular simple clause that's very clear, that shows the separation of powers, and as it is actually the ruling, it was correct in order. The president should sit there, wait for the Judicial Service Commission to do the interviews, finish, give the name to him to simply do the ceremonial role that he's supposed to do.
Actually, the president is only a conduit, just to pass the name from the Judicial Service Commission to Parliament.
Yes.
And the clarity of it in the Constitution is as night and day. You look at the arrangement of the chapters. You have Chapter 8 that talks about the legislature. You have Chapter 9, the executive, and Chapter 10, the judiciary. So for anybody to come in and
what
say,
would be the wisdom of the drafters, and the people who imagined this law? Because, I think you're struggling with it. What would be the wisdom? Because surely there must be some wisdom somewhere.
Yeah, this is where we are coming from. You see, all this, there's this thing that nowadays in this country we treat everything like that is a political process. Yes, this is a political process. So yes, you draft this law, but you're drafting it because there's a legal affairs committee in Parliament.
Yeah.
Which actually you come up with a motion like that, they'll have to pass it, and the drafters are probably in the state law office. They will draft it based on how. The job is not, as they say, is not to ask why. Theirs is to do and die. Theirs is to draft as they've been told, okay, this is what we want, this is what we want.
I think there is no wisdom in that, just mischief.
There's no. Well, appointments of Chief Justice have now, in 2 successive periods, proved to be a political hot potato. President Mwai Kibaki and Prime Minister Raila Odinga clashed bitterly over the appointment of the judges then, of picking Al Nasil Vishram, I should say. JSC was judged to be rightfully employer of the then and opened the doors of Dr. Willie Mutunga to be Chief Justice. So, gentlemen, there's a precursor to this. There's history into this. Would we say that the wisdom would have been, from those who had imagined this, to give the president the powers that he had before 2010 laws?
Okay. Maybe you go first.
Go first.
Now, I think the wisdom behind all the guys who wanted to move this particular clause and have it the president, give the president the powers, I think they're trying to look at it from a point of having control of the judiciary, so to speak, at the end of the day. And this is something which we may not want to go back to, because we know what it means when your right-hand men are seated there and supposed to make a very crucial decision. So what happens? The opposition we cry foul at the end of the day, and the ruling may not be in favor of the many, as it were.
Are we saying that there's absolutely no way to fix and get a CJ job. I mean, there's absolutely no way. It is above board, it's clean. Is that what we're saying?
I mean, it's crystal clear in terms of what procedure should be followed in terms of appointing the CJ. And I see no reason why there should be this kind of mischief where now the legislature wants to interfere with that process. But I think the problem does not begin and end with the legislature. I think it is a problem with the power brokers, the so-called owners of state, who are not necessarily political players. They are not the ordinary Kenyan like you and myself, but they are people who have interest in having their own men in positions that matter, and therefore they want to see a situation where we want to protect our looting business, quote unquote, so that at the end of the day, if you have a dispute, then we have our man making the final decision in the Supreme Court, and therefore we would have somebody occupying address number one.
This is deep. This is deep. That's deep.
I mean, that really for me is the bottom line.
Yeah, because, okay, fine, look at today's ruling, actually, which, and other rulings that have been there before, where the executive, which means the government, went to court, or government lost in the judiciary. And do you believe that if at all it was a case where the person in charge of the judiciary is appointed by the executive, could we be having this kind of rulings? We could not be having.
Are we saying before the judges we had which were appointed by the president, none of them was above board?
No, remember, do you remember one time when you had those things, why appoint a lawyer when you can buy a judge? We had such kind of stuff.
We've had
We're not saying that this thing has been eradicated completely.
And you remember, part of the conversation that before today's ruling was that the AG was already preparing himself, saying we would appeal if the decision does not go in our favor. And the question I ask, what interest would the executive have? Because the AG is an actor, is an agent of the executive.
Yeah, but at the
what
same
interest would he have in this? This is a ruling against Parliament, if you ask me, because it is Parliament
Is an
that passed.
advisor to
Yes.
the president?
In the principles of separation of powers, the AG would then be there playing what is called amicus curiae to the court as an advisor to the court, because he is an agent of the executive. He cannot be a party to it. That is my 2%.
James, my take is this. Why would the president, for crying out loud, want to have control of the judiciary through the appointment? You know, if we give the president 3 names, then he feels one of these people he will play to my tune. That's the person, whether regardless whether he passed the vetting well, number 1, 2, or 3, he will choose. But in this case, what the court has said is we need to have a person who has been vetted, okay, through past all the avenues, and we have him seated there to make decisions that are not executive oriented. Try to imagine, if you choose me to that particular position and you are the executive, what will stop me not to make rulings according to your wish? Mm-hmm. And this is what you should be running away from. We make this institution independent as it is in the Constitution.
My point is, where was the crisis that actually we needed to change this?
Actually,
where was the crisis?
Well,
the
the president, on not one occasion but numerous occasions, has expressed frustrations at the slow pace of cases, corruption cases, cases to do with, is it wildlife, and this, he has been unhappy with the entire, slowness of the wheels of justice.
But James,
he has made it quite clear.
But James, the president being given the powers does not mean that he will fast track the process.
Well, it could possibly appoint someone who is in
and that is where the independence, that the wisdom of the Kenyan people in the Constitution, that they want the independence of these 3 arms of government, that is where the interference begins. When the president or whoever it is in the executive wants to imagine that we want to have somebody in the judiciary, that we can be able to order and tell them this case is going too slow, can we expedite it? That is where the problem is.
Because you might,
Kenyans should not allow that.
He could do that in a case where he has interest, you see, and then in the process, other cases that probably for, let me say, smaller people, take a backseat. But you see, I'm not going to speak for the judiciary because I don't know what goes on in there. But I think the independence...
We're taking a very dim view of actually the goodness and the willingness of the president to make things
No.
work.
The thing is,
he's elected.
Let's go back to what he pointed out, that actually the AG wants to appeal. But this was a ruling against the National Assembly. I mean, he is the government's chief legal advisor. If this was a ruling against the government, then it was okay. But now why? I mean, this was a ruling against the National Assembly. The thing had not been signed into law yet, had it? No?
I agree with you. It is not the executive that took this thing to court.
Yeah.
A ruling has been made against the legislature.
So
I will expect from the legislature to make an appeal.
An appeal, not the AG.
That is my expectation. But beyond that, let's look at when you want Article 31, Articles 132 of the Constitution define what the role of the president is, who the president is to the country. You look at the Judicial Service Commission Act, the functions of the JSC are very, very clear. Why do we want to circumvent that and now make the role of appointing the CJ a presidential decision? It is not. It is a function of the Judicial Service Commission. Let it remain as such.
All right? My point is this, and I need to make this point so that it's clear.
Yeah, you're really trying.
Why are we taking a dim view of the president, actually, out of the goodness of his heart, out of a mandate that he has of the people to say that certain government arms are not working in tandem with my vision? And
Actually, this was not, let's be fair to the president. This thing was coming from the National Assembly. It had not reached the president yet. So it was coming from the National Assembly. The National Assembly says, like, we want to give you powers. It has not reached to him yet. We want to give you powers to appoint this person. We are not being, to be fair to the president, I want to believe that he had nothing to do with this. This was just the wisdom of the National Assembly.
Okay.
Now, what we need to question is why.
James, that makes me ask you.
You have to ask me after this, because the government has suffered heavy setbacks at the hands of the courts. The courts sharply disagreed with the state then when it put forward a series of security laws, terming them unconstitutional. Most recently, the courts threw out that bit of law it was used by police to harass bloggers and journalists. And now this law giving the president powers to appoint Chief Justice. Who's advising the president?
Maybe you know better.
But who's advising the president? Because I mean, it is heavy losses.
I mean, it's the Attorney General who's advising the president. In other words, it's the Attorney General who is failing in his work. Now, having said that, the reason why all these laws flop is simply because they have not been correctly drafted, so to speak, as per the spirit of the Constitution, right? So why do you want to draft, to do an amendment to a law that is going to go contrary to the spirit of the Constitution? And that's why we have the courts to safeguard such steps. And that's why, at the end of the day, if the executive feels so, it will always meet resistance from the courts. And maybe perhaps that's the reason why the presidency or the executive wants to have say who is the Chief Justice of the country.
Is it connected like that?
Well,
in your mind?
In my mind, I think it is very clear. You asked who is advising the president. And my thinking is that, without giving names, I think there are a few people there who do not really understand what the role of government should be, and this really is a problem, if you ask me. These are people, I do not think that the AG, a man I hold a great respect for as a brilliant legal mind, would make the kind of mistakes we've seen him make.
So who's making the mistakes?
The mistakes are, like I said, the power brokers are the people who are really pushing these things and saying we can have our way, but at the end of the day,
but someone which at the end of the day, has to look at the draft, look at the wording, look at how it is, and submit it.
This is why I say, who is the AG? Is the chief government advisor, right? So even if there are power brokers and all that, is the gate stopper to what is supposed to go to courts as far as from the government side. So at the end of the day, I'll say the AG is misadvising the president.
All right?
Institutionally speaking, that would be the case. But I think when you go deeper, like
political speaking,
politically, and when you consider all factors on the table or under the table as well, I think the problem may not be the AG. The problem could be the power brokers really pushing things because they have an agenda that they want to pursue. Because there is no way in my wildest of imaginations that a brilliant fellow in the shape of Githu Muigai would lead the government, would let the government have the kind of handballs in the box like they have had.
All right.
You see what you're saying actually is that the buck has to stop somewhere. Actually, that's what you're saying in
And
very
that
many
buck-
words.
and that buck
the buck has to stop
stops with
somewhere.
AG.
I mean, we will call all these people. We'll call all these people. We'll call all, name all, talk about all these power brokers and all that. But at the end of the day, who is in charge? We have to hold to account Mr. Kenyatta. He is the person who's in charge, because very many voters, very many of people who voted, they don't know that there actually may be a retinue of 1,000 or 1,200 people who actually advise the president. To them, the president is the parental authority.
At the end of the day, the president has to make a decision, a conscious decision, having being advised, by, his experts and that he's hired. Isn't that the case? So should we be, again, blaming the president for taking the wrong advice?
You're talking about when it comes to all these cases that
Yes.
they've been lost
Yeah,
and all
yeah,
that.
yeah.
I think probably to be fair to the president, or to be fair to the presidency, I think here's a case where he lets the law take its course. That's why probably he does not interfere in the cases when they're going on, and then they end up losing. So because no, you know what?
But
Just a minute. Let's get my point. I think what you're trying to say here, that because it's the government who took this case to court, the government has to win, and that's why you're getting
That is
befuddled.
not the point. The point is this: like you said, the buck has to stop somewhere.
Yes, it has to
now,
stop somewhere,
there are two things for me here. You're talking about legislation that has been passed and it is against the Constitution. So in that respect, the buck stops with the Speaker and the House Business Committee and the National Assembly. If you're talking about, policy matters, if you're talking about decisions of the executive
that are probably made at the cabinet
that
level.
are made at the cabinet level, the
yes.
buck stops with the presidency. Where we are having weak systems, weak checks and balances, then you blame the Kenyan people for not exercising their sovereignty as they've given themselves under Article 1 of the Constitution. That, for me, is the bottom line. And those are the various elements that we've got to look at for us to be able to then say we are holding someone accountable. But we cannot hurl everything at one door and say
at
that is
the
where it
executive,
stops.
at the presidency. Actually, what we need to say here is
Right.
we have a very chaotic legislature.
Well,
Yeah.
If you like.
I think.
Oburu Ochema Ramogo on Twitter says that the law was challenged after the president signed and assented to it. And in fact, this challenge was by Katiba Institute, who are the ones who challenged this law. So it was actually assented by the president.
Also, which means the AG is very right to, because now it's the state, it's the executive that has lost.
Yes.
So the AG is very right in, okay, fine, but we learn a new thing every day. I mean,
Again, I'm thinking, let's not try to exonerate certain institutions or quote as from blame. I think everybody has a role to play. They've got to take it.
Yeah.
If they don't do it, then blame them square.
All right. Now, tonight, it emerged that majority of traffic police officers facing the vetting panel have difficulties with English, breaking news, but that will be the list of their worries. Top cops interviewed are facing that old familiar problem, the inability to account for monies in their account. One police officer, for instance, could not account for 50 million shillings in his account. Gentlemen, I don't know, you've seen this vetting, the vetting business, and how it's a bit chaotic and it's a bit sad, to watch, policemen, top police cops not being able to account for monies and giving all manner of stories.
Now, James, this is a very interesting one. And I will start by asking a very simple question to my fellow journalists. If you can't account what you have, it simply means you got it through other means.
dubious means.
Dubious means.
No. I mean,
No, James, let's be frank.
Well,
If you can't account for what you have, it means you got it through dubious means.
no, it means that your memory is fading, and
Come on.
No. The gentleman today in Mombasa says that he has Mpango Wakando, who has a charcoal business, and he can explain that money through the charcoal business. And that is arrangement. That's how I explain the millions that landed in his account.
James, let's not go there because you know very well there's no way Mpango Wakando, so to speak, can really bring in that much. However, this is what I want to say. You know, the police force for years has been tainted in a very bad way, right? Presented in a very bad way in terms of corruption at the force. Actually, even when recruitment comes in, here a lot of money has been exchanged hands for guys to be recruited. And you and I know very well that corruption is rife in the police force. So when you can't really explain how you have made your millions, it means you got the money through a dubious way which you don't want to say. It's as simple as that.
Is it the fact that they have the courage and you know, the stamina and to face the panel and show up and knowing clearly that your accounts cannot be reconciled?
They had no option.
It says
Well,
something.
no, they had to face the panel.
The point here is, and I want to start from where, what exactly is the wisdom behind, the constitutional provision that we need to have these guys vetted? And it is about suitability. And if you look at that word suitability and you break it down, it has several components. One of the things that is shocking, that they have challenges expressing themselves in the two languages. That is the official and national language. Now, that for me is point number one to confirm that they are not suitable. Then we go to the next level, which is, how do you account for your life? Lifestyle audit, if you ask me, is the biggest problem that we have. And if someone cannot explain, I mean, we know the drill. Let us not, try to go round and round, when we can hit it right at home. There is that cop, I think, who said, and he was very remorseful. He even said, I am a sinner, forgive me, and all that kind of stuff. And he said, I've been engaging in corruption, and we know what the story is. Let us not go, round and round.
Should you forgive him, Clay? I mean,
No,
after
I think yes, because, okay, fine. One thing, you mentioned lifestyle audit as one of the components of probably reforming the police force or just reforming probably the civil service in Kenya. But it's something that's so difficult. It's not something that's very easy to, because, I mean, somebody will tell you like, okay, fine, my first salary may be 20,000, I invested it and I've been getting returns. So you're going to audit, I mean, are you going to now, it's not very easy to do. But
It's no rocket science, really.
But I think what we need to do, the reforms and reforming the police going forward, not forget about like, let's forgive him, let's do what. I think going forward, when we want to reform the police force, we will start with training. We will start with training so that we have a proper training regime, that when you leave that place, you actually know that these are some of the things I should not do. And so much so that even during recruitment, you will not try to bribe, because bribery at the police force or at our forces starts right at the recruitment level.
But then the question I'm asking, and I've been thinking about it a lot, is that, James, how do you deal with the fact that you have hundreds, perhaps dozens of thousands of cops who are, you've trained them how to handle the various kinds of arms. These are people who have privileged information, and you've seen that some of these people can be a security threat when they are out of the force. How do you deal with that kind of dicey situation, that now you have to read the force of 60, 70,000, guys who've been there for donkey years, and then you're bringing in a new crop? We have to grapple with that particular challenge.
Shall we agree that it's a country problem? Shall we agree that this country, as the president rightfully said, it's full of thieves? Shall we agree? And on that note, shall we take a break? Because we have plenty more coming up, including Donald Trump hitting that magic number. He's officially the nominee for the Republican Party.
Republican
Absolutely. Taking a short break.
Don't give people heart attacks.